Gary Edgington.
Perfect. Edgington.
Gary Edgington. Welcome to the Bookaholic podcast. Wow, we've been talking so much.
I know. Well, thank you for having me. Believe me, it's a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun so far. We haven't even started
So
yet.
far, the audience is not in on it. We've been talking the whole time, and then I goof up your name. I promise you, I'll have it
No
right
worries.
by the end. By the end.
No
But
worries.
welcome to the Bookaholic podcast. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
to have you here because
Likewise, I
you
assure you.
written something that seems so exciting. I
Thank you.
love a good mystery. I love a good thriller. And that's what it seems like you are presenting to us today.
Thank
But
you.
before we dive into this book, into this novel, we want to set the tone
Mhm.
for how you even came up with it. And you have an extensive police background with counterterrorism. Oh my gosh, counterterrorism. What's wrong with me today? Counterterrorism
Yes, ma'am.
sprinkled in. So you are well versed. A lot of times people will write books and have absolutely no experience, and you wonder just
Yes, they
how
do.
authentic the
Yes.
story will be. But your story is authentic based on your experience. Tell us about your fascinating career.
With pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, so retired 30-year law enforcement, worked a few years in patrol. So I have a few, but most of my time is spent as an investigator. And then in 1999, I started working on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I was a special agent with the California Department of Justice. And
Mhm.
I worked on the Joint Terrorism Task Force, um, and then got promoted and went into internal affairs and did that for about 8 months. And then 9/11 happened. I
Ooh,
still had my security clearances because I'd worked with the FBI for quite a while prior to that on joint cases with them. So you have to have a security
mhm.
clearance to work with them.
Right.
And so I had all that stuff, and I was still in a liaison role with the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So when we stood up, when the Attorney General of the state of California, Bill Lockyer, decided that we needed to do something about counterterrorism in California, they stood up task forces with the Department of Justice throughout California, and I was asked to take command and found the task force in Los Angeles, and that's what I did, and I did that from uh, September of 2000. Uh, 9/11, September
Right. Right.
2001. Hello,
Yes. Yes.
until until my retirement in May of 2008.
Oh, okay.
And so that gave me a lot more experience on the international terrorism side and exposure to training and all sorts of things. And then in 2008, I took a position. I retired and took a position. Like all good civil servants, I became a double dipper, collecting my retirement and then also working for somebody else
Right.
over in Iraq. I don't know how I convinced my wife to let me do that, but that's a whole
Oh,
other story.
that sounds
But
terrible.
anyway, I went over there to Iraq and I was embedded with the 10th Mountain Division improvised explosive device defeat cell. That's a lot to say.
Yes.
And I worked, and while I was there, um, the idea for writing something was kind
Mm.
of bouncing around in my head. I'd have done some writing in the past. I had a screenplay option many,
Oh,
many years ago.
oh,
I
wow.
have an unfinished novel that is probably going to get dredged out and polished up one of these days.
Okay.
And so um, uh, there was unfortunately, it's really, as you know, this is really such a tragic thing to have happen. But
Mhm.
I mean, there was a rash of young soldiers taking their lives on base, and then there
Yeah.
was also a an attempt murder on another forward operating base that fell under my purview. I had about 20
Mm.
advisors, embedded advisors reporting to me. And one of those guys was involved in that investigation, helping out the Army with that because he is an extremely experienced retired LAPD
Yeah.
investigator. And so I thought to myself, what if there was a bunch of unsolved homicides happening on this sprawling military base,
Right.
and they needed a little help from a retired local salty old veteran cop. And how would that look and how would that work? And so it
Mhm.
started out as sort of like an Agatha Christie 10 Little Indian story.
Oh my
But
God.
then when I got home and I actually started penciling it, I thought, "Now, God bless you, Agatha. I love your stuff, but I'm going terrorism." Because, you know, as the wise man said, "Write what you know," and
Exactly.
so that's what I did. And I sat down and started writing it, and then got called away to Washington D.C. on another uh, uh, contracting gig, and I worked on the
Mhm.
Guantanamo detainee cases for a while, and then I came back to
Mhm.
LA and worked with Office of Counterterrorism at the Long Beach Police Department, and then went to Tampa, Florida, and worked at MacDill Air Force Base at U.S. Special Operations Command for a while, and then finally came home and then finished the book.
Ah,
And got an agent in Los Angeles, which is not an easy task. And
yeah.
he was, we went back and forth on, some changes, made all the changes, everything was ready to go. And God bless him, he passed away.
Oh,
And very tragically, young guy,
mm,
a really
mm,
great guy, he passed away. And so now I was faced with trying to find another agent, which
right,
wasn't so easy.
right.
And then we moved here to Charlotte, which
Yes.
kind of threw everything off. And so
Yeah.
finally, I'm like, I'm looking at this manuscript, and I'm going, I have put so much time and effort and work into this darn thing that was,
Yeah.
it's been through 14 or 15 different, iterations.
Right.
I got to do something with it. So I went out in earnest. I got involved with the Charlotte Writers Club,
Yes.
and then I decided, okay, I need I need to focus all of my energies on finding an agent and getting this thing published. And
Right.
I did.
You
And
did.
uh I signed with the company last year in Virginia,
Mm.
and my agent's in Chicago,
Okay.
and um here we are.
Wow. Wow. Well, I
Pardon me.
talk to so many different authors, and their path to publishing is so different,
Hmm.
and a lot of times people don't have agents and they do the whole self-publishing route or
Yep.
a hybrid or whatever have you. Some people have publicists, some people don't. And so, it's just all this really convoluted of how you can go about that, but it's a path for everyone to get their
It
words out.
is. And it is a really great thing that self-publishing, it has really taken on a life of its own with,
Mhm.
self-publishing. The guy in Britain, I'm talking about, who does that whole thing. And then there's, I've talked to other self-published people that are very, very successful. And
Yes.
I just, I didn't have the confidence in my abilities to go that route. So
Mhm. Mhm.
so I went a sort of more traditional route, and
Right.
um, and so here we are.
Yes. Well, now
um,
let me dip into a little sidebar here. You mentioned the Charlotte Writers Club.
mhm.
Now, how does that group help you? How did you find out about them?
uh, One of our neighbors here, when we moved to Charlotte, you know, unlike in LA where people live on the same street and don't meet each other for 40 years, in Charlotte,
Yeah.
people actually are friendly. Even
Yes.
during a pandemic, people were friendly. And
Yes.
one of our dear friends, whose husband actually is a retired FBI agent, so we immediately hit it off.
Oh.
But she is a brilliant, brilliant writer, short story
Mm.
writer, and
Mhm.
she's a member of the Charlotte Writers Club, and so she introduced me, and I, got involved and was in a book critique club, a couple of different book critique groups, but
Mhm.
um, I felt like it wasn't right for me for my manuscript because it was already pretty well done
Right.
and baked in and had been through a million different reviews.
Right.
I needed to go back and start sending out the letters and the query
Mhm.
letters and the you know and to try and get an agent, and that's kind of what I did. So
Yes, 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 yes. Well, I'm glad that's working out for you. Now,
thank you.
let's go ahead and talk about outside the wire. Now,
Yes.
one of my favorite questions of asking folks is, and of course, I do know where a lot of your world building is coming from. Your world building is coming from your career
Correct.
and the places that you've been and the things that you've done. But how did you come up with the title? And how did you come up with the fact that this the retired LA counterterrorism cop gets to have a love interest? You added that in. I see.
Well, yes. Yes. We'll get to we'll do question A first here.
Okay.
Originally, the title
Yeah.
was The Baghdad Diet. And
Oh,
yes,
the
I know.
Baghdad.
The Baghdad Diet. And the
Oh,
reason why is there's a lot of humor in this book. There's a lot of sardonic humor, and that was
yes.
sort of in keeping with the character who the book is written in the first person, and the character is always kind of making fun of stuff,
Right.
and of course, coming from LA, it's the diet of the month, diet
Oh,
of the week,
yes.
the South Beach diet, the
Yeah.
Malibu diet, the whatever diet. And I
Yeah.
lost 25 pounds when I was overseas, and I thought, what about the Baghdad diet? And I
Right, right,
thought it
right.
was really funny. And there's
But
actually there's actually a chapter called the Baghdad Diet.
oh, okay.
But in actual fact, nobody else really thought it was that funny.
Yeah.
My agent said, I don't know if this is a cookbook or what. We've got to change this. And so my wife takes credit for Outside the Wire. And
Oh,
yeah, she takes credit for that. And I tip my hat to her for that,
wow.
because I think it really is a good title. And my agent suggested the bit at the bottom, which I think is a really good thing too, a book of murder, love, and war, because
Yeah.
that really is what the story is.
Yes.
It is a murder mystery, a love story. It's set in as much as a love story can be, set in a war zone, which is kind
Yeah.
of like, there's no carriage rides, there's
Yeah, no.
helicopter rides, but no carriage ride, and a war story
Yeah.
because, I mean, it is a real no kidding war story in the last act.
Mhm, mhm.
And so that's how we got to Outside the Wire.
Got you.
Yeah. And I know you asked me a second question, but I was babbling so much it slipped right through my addled brain.
Well, you threw in that romantic,
Oh, yes, yes,
part, that
yes,
romantic
yes,
piece, and so, you're thinking you're gonna read more of a, Tom Clancy-esque
right.
type of book when you see this. But what made you wanna throw in a dash of romance?
Well, because women read a lot of books,
We do.
and you do, and you buy a lot of books, and
Yes.
I'm not, and you know, I didn't want to make this, and I thought it would be fun, and
Right.
I wanted to make this appealing to women, and women have responded to this in ways that I could not possibly imagine. I
Okay.
am every time. I mean, guys tell me, "I loved your book, man. It was really great. I really dug it." Blah. I'm like, "Okay, thank you so much. That's really great." When a woman tells me that I loved your book, I couldn't put it down, man, that is music to my ears because I
Wow.
know that I did it right.
Yes.
And and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make it not just a as we in my business call like a knuckle dragger trigger puller kind of book. I wanted to
Yeah.
make it a little deeper than that. And
Right.
their love story is I think pretty realistic because she's an MD. She's a major in the army and an MD, and he's a
Mhm.
retired LAPD detective lieutenant,
Mhm.
and he's a typical cop. He's got a comment about everything, and he cracks jokes all the time. And she rolls her eyes and looks, did somebody tell you you're funny? There's that
Right.
kind of banter back and forth,
Right.
and so uh, it makes it real. And I mean,
Mhm.
I've had I've had a lot of women come up to me and say they've really enjoyed the book and they couldn't put it down,
Ooh.
and things like that. Which, of course, as a writer, when somebody tells you, when they either quote your lines from your book, or
Yes.
they tell you they were up all night long and couldn't put it down, that is music to your ears.
Yes,
And
yes,
that happens.
I
And
can
so
only imagine.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So there
Well,
you go.
Well, was it difficult for you to create the love interest? I can easily see how you can create the retired cop,
Right.
but how was it to create the woman?
Well, I have a wife and I have a daughter.
Okay, just taken from that.
So they slapped me around a little bit and kept me straight on that, and they said, "Hey, there's no way about this would work. She wouldn't do this,
Ah,
da 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 da." So
yes,
that helped me.
yes.
My son-in-law is a surgical technician, and so he helped me. And another friend who is
Mhm.
actually his quote is on the cover of the book. He's a retired lieutenant colonel with the Air Force. He's a flight surgeon
Hmm,
who read the
yes,
manuscript and kept me straight on the medical part of this thing, because
yes.
there is definitely a medical part to this book for sure.
Okay, okay.
And so he kept me straight, and Eric kept me straight. So I kind of dialed it all in, and the other stuff. Now, the other stuff was inspired by my experiences, and some of the things that you read in the book actually did happen to me,
Okay,
but some of them didn't.
okay, okay, okay,
And
right, right,
that's
right.
that's the magic, right?
Yes, most definitely. You gotta have that magic. Well,
That's right.
now, this book seems to me, just by reading it, just by reading the description, that it should have a follow-up. Do you have that planted, in your
Funny you
mind?
should mention that. Yes, actually I
Mm,
do. Actually
okay.
I do. I am now, I actually was writing some of it on the plane yesterday. I'm about 65 pages into the first draft.
Okay.
And it is a follow-on that takes place a couple years later. It's a
Okay.
terrorism story that will have aspects in our beloved North Carolina, up in the Asheville area.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and But a lot of it will be set in Los Angeles,
Okay.
and it is, like I said, a terrorism story. And Rick, who is the lead protagonist, and Nancy
Mhm.
will find their way back together again, because what happened to them in Iraq really was pretty traumatic,
Mhm.
and both of them
Mhm.
have leave that Iraqi experience suffering from PTSD. Now,
Oh.
Nancy, being an intelligent, sophisticated medical professional, is aware that she's screwed up. Rick,
Mhm. Mhm.
being the macho knucklehead cop, is like,
Yeah.
I'm fine, no problem. Well,
Right.
he gets a wake up call in the second in the second book, and then he realizes, oh, I am screwed up. And so
Yeah.
it's sort of a journey to find his way back, as well as
Mhm.
catch bad guys and save the
Mhm.
world and reunite with his lady love, Nancy.
Okay.
So
Okay. All right.
there you go.
That sounds great. That sounds fantastic. And would you, beyond Rick and Nancy, do you have any other thoughts of other books with other characters up your sleeve?
Well, you know what? I'm a major, major, major history person,
Mhm.
and I have roots in this state that go back 250, 300 years.
Oh.
So I would like to write a historical thing someday.
Mhm.
And I would, which is something I really would love to do. And
Mhm.
also, um, I have that screenplay that was optioned is an LA murder mystery,
Yeah.
and
What about
and
that?
I've actually thought about making that as the prequel to Outside the Wire.
Oh, yeah.
Massaging it, flipping it around, and doing some stuff to it. I already had tried turning it into prose a while back, and I got
Mhm.
distracted by something else.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's there. But I think oh, and another one that people have encouraged me to write is a the story of my career and my father, being killed in the line of duty, and how that
Yes.
affected
Yeah.
me, and what happened,
Yes.
and all of that. I actually talked to somebody who was an eyewitness, who was never interviewed by the police, who
Oh my
painted
goodness.
such a radically different picture than what I thought had happened, without
Oh
getting into
my.
all the mechanics of it. One of the things I'd kind of beaten myself up for all these years is I bought my father this really super wazoo technical high security holster for his
Mhm.
weapon
Mhm.
about a year or so before the incident. And
Mhm.
I thought, because people had witnessed this, had said that they thought he had had trouble pulling his gun out. I've been
Mhm.
beating myself up thinking,
Yeah.
this is I should have never done that, blah, 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 blah. Keep it simple and all that. Well, as it
Mhm.
turns out, based on this witness's statement, that really was not a factor.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so
Mhm.
that has been something that people have encouraged me to do, is write
Mhm.
something about that. I don't know if I want to or not, but
Mhm.
it's in the offing,
Right.
it's in the offing. So, well,
Right.
there you
Well,
go.
it's sounds like you have plenty of creative spaces to explore in the future,
Yeah.
and I do believe it's going to be worth any reader's time to check you
Thank you.
out.
Thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate that. Thank you very
So
much.
so here we are, Gary Edgington.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for
Thank
being on the
you.
Bookaholic
Thank you.
podcast,
Thank
and
you.
we will have Gary's information in the podcast show notes and in the video description box on my YouTube channel. Gary, once again, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Trust me. Loved it. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Great.